Hey everyone, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today I'm going to introduce you into drag and drop in iOS 11, and if you didn't know, drag and drop also works within an application on iPhone. This is what we're going to look at today. So I can just select some pieces of text here, for example, from my text view, and dragging it to my table view here at the bottom. And as you can see, once I move into this drop zone, I can actually put that right here below my first line on my first row. I can also select just one word here, dragging it right between those two elements, those two rows. So this is a very powerful feature also for iPhone, not only for iPad. And in case you were wondering about my background at the moment, this is for my new Patreon account. And many of you told me, Brian, create a Patreon account so that we can support you a little bit more. And I'm infinitely grateful if you plan to do that. And Patreon is a great place to support content creators such as myself by becoming a patron. You support me with a specific amount of money each month, and you can choose with how many dollars you'd like to support my work. Either you choose to support me with $1 per month, then you will get a cool desktop wallpaper each month, or you choose to support me with $5 per month, which is even better for me, and what you get from that is exclusive access to commented project files for my YouTube tutorials, and also I'm going to credit you in one of my upcoming tutorials. Plus, of course, you will also get the reward for the $1 support. So you will also get the exclusive access to the commented project files if you support me with $10 a month. Plus, you get the chance to choose what tutorial you'd like to see next. So this is my new Patreon account and my Patreon page, and I'm very excited to see if this is something that you also like, and I'm infinitely grateful if you plan to support me using Patreon. And now let's start with our project with drag and drop, and I've already opened up Xcode for that, and what we want to do is create a new single view application. So let's make sure to select the single view app template. Let's choose next, and my product name is going to be drag and drop text, and I place that on my desktop. And what we want to do here now first is creating the user interface, and you've seen it in the example. It's really simple. We just have a text view, which I'm going to drag to my view controller, just placing it somewhere in the top left corner and making it a size so that everything of this text fits into our text view. And what I want to do here is actually deactivate the editable function for this text view so that we do not get the keyboard popping up when we want to drag something from the text view. Of course, if you plan to use a text view for drag and drop where user can enter text, do not deactivate the editable behavior. So this was the first part. The second part is a table view, which I'm placing in the lower part of our application. And as you know, when we are working with a table view, what we also need is a table view cell for the prototype cell that we always need. So this is our prototype cell, and a prototype cell also needs a reuse identifier. So let's make it a little smaller. All right, and I'm entering a reuse identifier in the attributes inspector, telling it to be named cell, which is pretty standard. And with that, we are actually done setting up our user interface. But what we still should do is to accommodate for different screen sizes. Since this is a very simple layout, we can go into the size inspector and just add some auto resizing masks. So I'm pinning it, my text view, to the left, to the top, and to the right, and I make it stretchable in width. And for my table view, I'm selecting or pinning it to the left, to the bottom, and to the right, and also making it stretchable in width so that it looks something like this in this preview. So with that done, we actually completed the user interface, but what we still need is some outlets for our user interface components. So I'm bringing up the assistant editor and I'm selecting my text view, pressing Control on the keyboard, dragging to my view controller class and naming this text view, and doing the same thing for my table view. I'm using the document outline, and I'm adding an outlet for my table view, hitting connect, and we're done. And now let's really start with the cool stuff with drag and drop. And since drag and drop works with a lot of delegate functions, I'm going to put that into an extension of this view controller so that it's separated from my view controller stuff and from the table view stuff that we have to add later. So let's first start with an extension to our view controller. And what I want to do here is use two delegates. First of all, the UI text drag delegate, which is special and which we can use for the for our text view. For other components, for standard views, you could use the UI drag interaction delegate. And what we also need is, because we want to put or drop things into our table view, we also adopt the UI table view drop delegate. We could also use the UI drag interaction delegate, which is an interface to configure and control drag operation or drag interaction. But since we have the text drag delegate, this is more useful for our purpose using text or dragging text. And we also have, for example, the UI drop interaction delegate, which is also very useful because this is the standard interface for configuring and controlling a drop interaction. But since we have specialized components like a text view and a table view, let's go with the specialized delegates. But the principles are fairly the same, as you will see in a second. So this is going to be our extension for using drag and drop. And our next step is going to be to add the required delegate functions, starting with item for drag. This is the first function that we definitely need because this tells the system what we actually want to drag. And for the drop feature, what we need is TableView perform drop with coordinator. So these are the two delegate functions that we definitely need. And as you can see here, I just built our app. We are missing a return in a function expected to return a UI drag item. And this is what we are going to do next. So now we have delegate functions for the item drag and for the drop. And as you can see, we need to return a UI drag item array here in items for drag. We can also return an empty array telling the system that there is nothing to drag actually. But if we return something here and if we return a UI drag item, this is going to be something that we can drop somewhere else. And to create such a drag item, we need a so-called item provider or an NS item provider object. So let's do that. Let's create an item provider. And we need to initialize that with an NS item provider. And as you can see, we can initialize that in different kinds of ways. So we have item with a type identifier. This is a possibility using NS secure coding or using just an object, which is what we are going to do. We're giving our item provider a string, but this needs to be an NS string because NS item provider cannot deal with Swift structs. So let's first of all create a string, which should be the text that we selected and that we plan to drag from our text view. And here the drag request, which is of type UI text drag request, comes in very handy because we can use our text view property, which is our outlet from our text view in the storyboard, and use the text in UI text range function, which returns a string. And what we can do here is use our drag request and use the drag range, which tells us what we actually want to drag. And with that string, we can place that here into our item provider, and we could also place that into an if let statement, and only if we get such a string, we want to create an item provider. And here we use that string and cast that to an NS string because we really need to do that in order for that to work. And then we can return a UI drag item, which we initialize with an item provider. And there is no other possibility but to initialize that with our item provider. And as you can see, we need to convert that, or to place that into an array. So let's add some brackets around our item provider, or around our UI drag item. And if we do not get a text range, what we want to do is return an empty array and tell the system that there is nothing to drag for us. But before we can see anything regarding our drag operation, what we need to do is assigning our delegate. And we can also do some more stuff here, like assigning our TableView data source, because this is something that we also need to do. So now let's have a look. We're now in our view controller class, no longer in the extension. We're in view.load, and I'm taking my text view here, and I'm accessing the text drag delegate, as you can see here, and I'm assigning self. And what I now want to do, since I have a drag delegate, I also need a drop delegate. I'm using my TableView outlet and using the drop delegate and assigning self here. And since we have a TableView, we also need a TableView data source, so I'm also assigning that here. So let's use self as our data source. And since we're doing that, let's also make an extension for our view controller and adopting UI TableView data source right here. And since we are now doing all of that TableView stuff, let's also add the required functions here. So we have number of sections, which should be 1. We have number of rows in section, which I'm also going to return 1 now. And we have cell for row at index path. And here we create a cell using the TableView, accessing DQ, reusable cell with identifier, which in our case is cell for the index path. Index path, doing a little configuration here, making some space, cell text label text equals hello. Let's do it like that. And let's return that cell. Okay. And here we are. We have our hello, which indicates that our table view is working. And now I'm selecting a little portion of text here in my text view. Let's choose this small text here and long press it. And as you can see, it changes its color, or it's a little bit less visible. And if we were to print that string here, then we should be able, let's just really quickly do that. We should be able to see the text that we have selected and started to drag in the console. So let me just again use a portion of text here, selecting that bit, long press it, and as you can see, the nem, liberty, and so on, Latin stuff is now added to our console output right below. So with that in mind, we know that our drag operation should work, but the problem here is now that we can't really see that we started dragging, and we can't really drag it around. But there is another delegate function that we can use to configure how our preview for the lifting animation and for the whole drag procedure should look like. And therefore, I'm using the drag preview for lifting item function, text draggable view, drag preview for lifting item. And all of these functions are also existing for a more common use case with simple UI views. And you always, if you use such a drag preview for lifting item, you always have to return a UI targeted drag preview. And I've prepared a little image for that. So this is the drag icon that you have seen earlier. So I'm going to use my assets folder, placing that drag asset into my asset folder right here. And now we just have to create an image view, choosing our drag view, get a drag point for the animation, and then create a targeted drag preview. So let's start with an image view using UI image view. initializing it with an image. So we're using UI image named, and this was named drag. Next, we can configure our image view choosing a clear color as the background color. So I'm assigning UI color clear to the background color property. And then the important part now is to choose the drag view, which is the view that our drag is originating from. And we get that as a text draggable view property here in our function. So I'm just assigning that here. We have a little bit shorter object now, which is called drag view. And what we also can get is a drag point, which is where exactly is our drag operating originating from. Therefore, we're using the UI drag session object that we get, using the location function and inserting our drag view right here. So now we have the drag point, and next we need a drag preview target. So let's create that using or calling it target and initializing it with UI drag preview target. And we're initializing that with a container and a center. And the container is our drag view and the center is our drag point. And with that, we have the correct target. And with that drag view and the target, what we can do now, and our image view, we can now create a UI targeted drag preview. Isn't that cool? So now we simply return UI targeted drag preview, and we initialize it with a view with standard parameters and a target. So our view is the image view. Our parameters is simply a standard set of parameters, initializing that with UI drag preview parameters, and the target is our target. And once we build that, we shouldn't have any errors or warnings. We can run it in the simulator if it would work. So let me just quit the simulator, run it again, and now we should be able to drag something around here. So let's see. Here's the simulator. Here is our app. And now I'm selecting, again, portion of text, dragging it. And here we have our drag preview and moving it to the text view. You can see that we have this little plus icon indicating that we're going to copy it. But if I release it, nothing is going to happen. This is what we're going to have a look at next. And we already have the proper function for that, which is the drop, or the perform drop. And this is actually the most complicated part of the whole drag and drop thing. So what we need to do, in short, is getting an index path so that we know where we can drop our portion of text, and then we have to use our item that we have, or that we are currently dragging, and adding that to our table view. And since we're dealing with the table view, let me add a correct data source for my table view, which is going to be an array. Let's call it table view data, which is going to be an array of strings, and I'm directly initializing that here right below our outlets for text view and table view. And now I'm making also some changes here to my table view data source functions in our extension. I just put that into this extension so that we have this part for the table view, for our drag stuff, drag and drop stuff, and the standard view controller stuff. Makes it a little bit cleaner for you. And now for numbers of rows in section, what I need to do here is returning or removing this 1 and replacing it with the table view data and the count. And I'm also going to create a data object here in self-arrayed index path using the table view data array and accessing it with index path dot row so that I always get the correct table view data, or I'm going to call it table data or string object. Yeah, and then I'm assigning this string object to our text label and its text property. So all we do here in self-arrayed index path now is configuring the cell using an object, a string object from our table view data array. And now we actually need to place something into this array and into our table view. And this is what we're going to do in the perform drop with coordinator function of our UI table view drop delegate. So what do we have to do here first? So I told you that we need to create an index path, and I'm going to call that destination index path, which is an index path object. An index path always consists of a row and a section, but if we are lucky, we get a destination index path from our UI table view drop coordinator. So we check that using an if let statement, creating an index path object here and assigning the coordinator and its destination index path. So if we get one, we can use our destination index path object and assign the index path constant that we just created here. And if this does not work, what we need to do is create our own index path. First of all, creating a section, looking for the last section. So we're using the table view and the number of sections, subtracting 1. And for the row, we're using also the table view, getting the last row of the last section. So we're using number of rows in section. And then we create our destination index path by initializing it with a row and a section. So just passing along row and section here. And with that, we have our destination index path. And now we can attempt to load strings from the drop coordinator. So what we do is using the coordinator that we have here, which is the UI table view drop coordinator, accessing its session, and now asynchronously loading objects by using the load objects of class function. And here we have to provide a class type, and this needs to be the same class type that we chose for our NS item provider. So here again, we're using NS string and the class type using self. And for the completion, I just add a closure here using an items array, using the in keyword. And then we need to check if we can convert these NS item provider reading objects in this items array to an array of strings. And therefore, we are using a guard statement. So I'm creating a strings array object here using the items and try to cast them into an array of strings. And if this does not work, we return here and indicate that this did not work. And now all that's left to do is inserting our data or our string into our table view and into our array. So let's first of all put it into our array. So we're using self table view data and call the insert new element at index function, and the new element is, let's simply use strings or strings array and the first object. We can unwrap this and add a specific index path, which is our destination index path and row. And we can use the first object because we should not get more than one object from our drag operation, since we're only dragging one portion of text. And so we can use the first element of our string, and since we use the guard let statement, there should be something in that strings array, so we can force unwrap this right here. And with that, we've inserted it into our data array, so our self-arrayed index path function can access this array later on, creating a string object and adding it to the text label. But what we also want to do is nicely inserting our data into our table view, and therefore we're using table view and insert rows at a specific index path, which is our destination index path, and with an automatic animation. So I'm just adding automatic here, and we can build that and we can run that, and we should be good to go. So here we are in the simulator. We are selecting another portion of text here. I'm long pressing to start dragging it, and then I'm putting it to my table view. And as you can see, this works pretty nicely. We can add, or let me just drag that to the bottom. We can add another one, works nicely. We can use another portion, add that between those two text rows that we already added. And I think this is a very, very cool feature of iOS 11. And if you'd like to see more about drag and drop, then make sure to have a look at Swift Tutorial Conference 2017. There will be a lot of content about drag and drop there, hands-on experiences and great tutorials about real-world examples using drag and drop. You can register for free on swifttutorialconference.net, and also make sure to check out this Patreon account and see if you'd like to become my patron. I would be very happy if you chose to do that. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.